Welcome to the Shurman Report. Here's Peter Shurman.
Well, hi, everyone. Peter Shurman with another edition of the Shurman Report. Today, we're looking for two guests. One of them is busy trying to get to us, and I'm sure she will. And I'll name her when she shows up in the green room. But what we'll do is we'll take the second guest first because he's around, and he's a great guest. In fact, he's the first return guest that we've had on the Shurman Report. He's a crusty commentator. I called you crusty, Andy. With radio roots in the UK, he's Andy Stinton, who likes to be called the small businessman, We kick around a variety of topics, and Andy will join us in just a moment. No, I don't see any sign of the other guests, so we're going to go ahead. Andy is a regular on the Shurman Report, as I said. The great thing about him is he'll talk about anything. He's billed as the small businessman because that's what he is. So he reads and he listens and he watches and he forms opinions. And sometimes we actually are totally in sync. And other times he tells me I'm crazy, which is self-evident. Anyway, Andy Stinton, welcome.
Okay, first thing, let's
what are you doing with that CNN hat on? Are you part of the mushy middle?
No. My Fox News hat is in the wash because it's covered with bullshit.
Okay, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, we have to tell them that was actually rehearsed. We did rehearse that.
It was because I had to say something about CNN because you talked about it last time you were on and said it was kind of okay with you, and you didn't like Fox News. We won't relitigate. We'll leave that one alone and move on because you heard me yesterday, and I had an editorial. There's my other guest. Stay with us. Now I'm going to tell you. It's
well,
Lisa
why don't you put her in? I can come back.
She can come in and talk to us if she wants, but
yes,
she's going to talk about politics. Will you want to put 3 on and talk to Lisa?
Sure, why not?
Okay. Hi, Lisa MacLeod. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I think she can't hear me. See if you can adjust that thing and hear the rest of us and just wave at me when you can.
I can hear you now.
Oh, great. So let me introduce you more properly. Lisa MacLeod, MPP. Get yourself centered in the screen so we can see all of your beautiful face. You're talking. We brought Andy Stinton on early because we were afraid you were going to miss us, but I'm happy you're here. And if I can give the folks a little bit of history and Andy as well, Lisa and I go back a ways. She was elected a year before I was. I left after 7 years, but she had been there a year when I came in. But she's still there. So 18 years in the provincial legislature. 18 years in the provincial legislature.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Thanks.
And you've served. I think I have you all written down here.
Oh wow.
Yes, indeed. You were Minister of Heritage, Sport, and Tourism. You were also Minister of Children, Community, and Social Services. And now you are simply Lisa MacLeod, MPP.
Yes.
And happily so, I think.
Oh, I am. I'm delighted. It's given me an ability to really spend time on a couple projects that I love. Obviously, I like to talk about mental health and breaking barriers there. But Peter, and I'll say this to you, Andy, because I don't think we've met in person, but you know what? October the 7th changed for a lot of people, and it gave me my voice back, right? It gave me a platform to talk about things that I believe in, and I am not encumbered by anybody.
Let me just bring something up so that it's not an elephant in the room. Lisa, you suffered from depression for a period of time that really put you down, and you've come back all the way. And is what you're saying that October 7th was the needle that poked you and said, "That's it. I'm using my voice and I'm going to speak out."
Yeah. So I was, as you know, I've suffered from depression, and then it turned out it was really actually bipolar disorder, or I guess it's a disease, and which frankly would explain a lot of things, that idiosyncrasies that I had been dealt with. And it wasn't until I presented with mania. And then, I left the cabinet as a result of that. It was very hard. I had to get treatment. And when I just really felt that I really didn't have much to offer. And then here we were watching my constituents deal with rampant anti-Semitism. And we had, in my opinion, and we still do, a media that is fixated on telling one side of the story. But having been to Israel, I saw the other. So it sort of has been maybe a fixation for me. Maybe that's not the way, or maybe it's not the best way to describe it, but it became something that has given me my voice back. And it's a passion of mine to celebrate the Jewish culture, but also to get the story out, to be one of those people, just like you guys are, to tell the truth and to really start, changing the narrative that is out there, because the mainstream media believes it has won, and we all know that there is a reality in addition to that.
Well, you know what, Lisa, I better explain to the folks who are just tuning in, because we're live, that the reason you're looking at three faces, and there's me talking to you primarily, I started off with Andy. Andy and I, it's kind of you to say that we talk about realities, but we actually screw around a lot. And one of the reasons Andy comes on the show, no, you don't. Oh, he says he doesn't. Andy is one of those guys who runs a business in downtown Toronto, significant business, but we call him a small businessman. And we talk about not lighthearted stuff, real stuff. But for example, we were joking about the fact that he watches CNN and other people watch Fox. Other people watch Fox. Andy, you can explain it.
Let me answer that, Peter. We've already done this joke, Lisa. So ask again, and I'll give you the thing.
Okay.
What's with the hat, says Lisa. Andy says, my Fox hat is in the wash because it's covered with bullshit.
Oh.
Well, he's being honest. He's being honest. Okay. Well, and he's entitled to the opinion. And I can tell you that from viewers who we have and listeners who we have, I've had feedback from the last time he said that from a lot of people who think Fox is the be all and end all in news. And I also admitted last time that amongst many news media, I watch Fox News. I watch all the other ones as well, and some you haven't heard of, but I think you have to take all viewpoints into consideration. But let me go back serious again with you, Lisa, because I think October 7th triggers something immediately. And let me also say that Nepean, which you represent, is home to the majority of Jewish people, young families especially, in the Ottawa area. So you would have heard an awful lot, and still do, about the fact that Israel is embroiled in battle in the Middle East. And whether you're on one side or you're on the other side, there's no question who started that one. And I guess that's something that you have to take on. You and I had a discussion at one point about doing a podcast of our own, just the two of us, to address anti-Semitism. I think we both came to the conclusion that that's only going to take you so far. You can't come on every day or every week and simply talk about one topic. Yeah. But I wish you would tell the audience, and I think since Andy's on the screen and part of this, Andy, feel free to react. What happened in Nepean post October 7th?
Yeah, well, first of all, the CNN hat ain't that bad, Andy. I
don't actually watch CNN that much, actually. I'm a Reuters boy.
Yeah, really. I'm a Disney Channel type of girl. So, you escape from reality after a while. But, to answer, Peter's question, the reality in Ottawa, right, is that a majority of the Jewish citizens do live in this community. It's fast growing. So we have about 1,700 Jews that, according to the last census, 17,000 Muslims, 11,000 Chinese, 11,000, 13,000 Indo-Canadians. And then the rest are sort of a variety of different ethnicities. And so obviously, when you look at those numbers, you're looking at a very small group of people in a community. And my dad always taught me, you got to stand up for the little guy, whether that's a small business, the kid on a soccer team, the person that's getting bullied, you stand up for them. And I've always decided that, for me, anyway, anybody that needs to have a police presence outside of the place of worship is obviously under attack. And so I've always become very close with my Jewish friends and neighbors. But when the 7th of October hit, it was, I think, an egregious overreach by Hamas, but they're terrorists, so they're going to terrorize people. It was when I got back, and about 2 weeks later, when the full-scale throttle against the Jewish community in Canada really took place. So it was like they had about a week or two to mourn, the community did. And then it was this full-scale attack, likely led and funded by Iran. And it was sinister, and it has been sinister to this date. And you know what they say, that a lie can run around the world before the truth even gets its laces tied. And on time and again, I started seeing this. And Peter will tell you, Andy, that my husband is a defense and foreign policy analyst and expert. And, so we have these conversations quite frequently around the dinner table. And none of this is by spin or commentary or conjecture. It really is what's right and what's wrong. And I don't think we have to go back to October 6th to understand that October 7th changed what's happening in the Middle East. And so it became very easy for me to both defend my constituents in Canada who are dealing with extremism, but also then defend the state of Israel for a right to defend herself as the only functioning democracy in the Middle East. And so that's really what has driven me, and it has energized my my being to be part of this with the community. And it's a sad thing that it took that, but it's almost as if the fight by the Jewish community is my fight too, personally. And I just hope others will join us.
Well, I congratulate you for taking it on. I mean, you're obviously, and you have been for 18 years, a great representative for your constituents. And I imagine that particular subgroup of your constituents, the Jewish people, and I underscore the fact that I'm a Jewish person, reacted in a certain way post October 7th. But give it a couple of weeks, and we were looking at unbridled anti-Semitism essentially unleashed around the world. I've stopped calling it anti-Semitism. I started calling it what it really is, which is Jew hatred. So what is it? Is it that we responded as Jews, or more correctly, the Israelis responded as they should have, but they had a finite period of time to respond before they got called down on it? Because it seems like the world is against us. Indeed, it doesn't seem like it. I think it is.
Well, I mean, it's hard not to feel that way when I go for dinner with my friends, for example, and they have children. And this is what really bothers me, is when they have children who are going to school and they're dealing with your anti-Jewish hate. It's not just anti-Semitism. It's actually they're hated because of who they are. And that shouldn't happen in Canada. And that I think has just underscored how ugly this has become around the world. Canada doesn't get off the hook, but it's also something that is so well orchestrated by Iran and the Houthis and the Hamas and the Hezbollah and all of these types. And so that's a problem. But Golda Meir, she was a genius in the sense that, and I'll paraphrase her because I don't have the exact quote, but she said they won't be happy. Like when Jews are alive, that's when the other side is unhappy. Right. There is no love, and I don't understand it. And it really mystifies me how anybody could stand up and allow Hamas and others to take charge. In fact, I'll give you one example and I'll stop speaking for a second. But this Gaza Ministry of Health. Now, I'm old enough to remember, and hopefully
whatever that is.
Yeah, the Gaza Ministry of Health, they remind me of Iraq's Minister of Information. Remember, they would call him the Comical Ali or Baghdad Bob. Right. The whatever was coming out of his mouth was a lie. And when you look at the Gaza Ministry of Health, whatever you see come out of them is generally a lie. And then it goes around the world, and God bless her, Melanie Jolie will believe them. And then, 2 or 3 days later, you see images from the IDF or others that suggest that the attack or the death toll or whatever they're reporting wasn't what it was suggested to be.
Let me pull the strings tighter a little bit.
Can I jump in here as the Oakville Gentile?
Okay.
Sure.
I lived in Britain during the Trouble. So, and I'm not demeaning what's happening in Canada in any way, shape, or form, because any racist, any sort of divisive sort of attacks on another sect, another population is wrong. Let's clear that up. However, I lived in Britain during the Troubles, where you would have to check under your car to see if there was a bomb.
Mm-hmm.
That's very newsworthy. That people relate to. I think when you criticize the media, you're being somewhat unfair, and I don't usually stick up for them, in the fact that I'm a self-absorbed old British businessman in Oakville, and most of the people in this generation and most generations today are self-absorbed. They truly are. Nothing is happening in Oakville. I don't see it. I believe you, Lisa. I read it. I look at it in the news. But I have a lot of trouble relating to it because it's not in Oakville and it's not in Burlington.
All you have to do, Andy, is go downtown and watch people march in their hundreds, sometimes thousands, who are pro-Palestinian. Some people say there are people in there who are paid. Other people say they really are Palestinians, whatever it is. But it certainly makes me feel uneasy when I'm there. Oakville, you're a little bit isolated.
We're very isolated, but I think an understanding that the media these days, Lisa, your definition of the media, is that the CBC, Global, and CTV?
You know, maybe I've become a bit jaded, but I think it's all mainstream media. When I start to see them, you know, report on the facts, and I'm not being disingenuous here, but they're doing it like they're a pack. And so there doesn't seem to be the independent thinking that Peter and I would remember when I was just a young progressive conservative and he had just left the media. You had just left the media, I think, Peter, hadn't you?
Yeah.
And there was a glory days for sure in Canada. And I don't disagree with you. Like I'm not sort of slandering all media, but I am disappointed in the direction that they have taken this based on the facts and the figures that we see, particularly with open source. But I also want to comment, because I think you're right on the money. Whatever's happening in Oakville and Burlington is happening in a lot of places in Canada. So you're seeing this occur in Montreal, in Ottawa, and in Toronto. Some places once in a while, maybe in London or Windsor, perhaps in Vancouver. But it really is those three centers, right? The two economic centers and the political center of the country.
Sure.
And like I spent a lot of time in Nova Scotia. I'm originally from there, New Glasgow, Nova Scotia. Like it's not even an issue. And so they're not, and there's no real big communities there either of Jews, right? It's people just, they go on about their business, and I can see that probably happening with you. But that's, I think, why it's more important for people like myself and you to remind people.
Forget about me for a second, because I watch traditional media. I deal with Peter. I deal with other things to do with my business. But I have grandchildren, and your definition of the media and Peter's definition of the media. Peter's definition of the media is a guy on a penny farthing bike throwing his newspaper on the porch. But that's another story. But today's media is social media. Yeah. My grandkids of 16 and 21 are not watching CTV.
Fair enough.
And I think that if you want to influence change, I think you have to, or make change, I think you have to get to that part of the media, which we as older people really don't know how to address.
Yeah. I think you're right. And Lisa, if you want a word on that.
Well, so I think TikTok is an area where a lot of younger people are getting their information. I think that you've seen what has happened with the occupations at the universities, and I think that's played a large part. I actually have a 19-year-old daughter. That's how old she is now, Peter. But
good God, I remember her running the halls at Queen's Park. She's knee high to me. I don't know. Crazy.
She was an infant then, but you know, that's where they're getting their information. And unfortunately, as we're starting to see, and we're starting to see this creep out in Canada, but elsewhere, is there is a great deal of involvement by the Chinese, the Russians, and I guess Iran now, in getting the message out there and through certain algorithms and that sort of thing. So for us, for example, Andy, like as members of the Ontario legislature, we're banned from going on TikTok because of the security issues that arise with dealing with a Chinese application. So these are the weird things that I don't think any of us ever thought we would be confronted with.
TikTok, which is Chinese, but how about the rest of the social media? I saw a figure the other day that said there is a percentage of the population that gets their news from Jon Stewart. That is verifiable, but it's also friggin' scary that he's a comedian. He's there for entertainment.
But there's a percentage of the population, Andy, that gets its news from X or Twitter. There's a percentage of the population that think that Facebook will give them their news. I think that's all nonsense, but I'm not necessarily from that generation. I get my news from everywhere because there's no one single source that I feel I can trust to give me what I want to know.
No, but you're competing, Lisa. It's the same with the issue we're addressing here. You're competing with the soap opera that is Trump. Now, if I am a viewer that's going to be much more appealing. I mean, Trump is like so.
Well, we're not going to get into Trump today because
No, I'm
that
not
could give us another hour.
But
What
you're
I want to do,
comparing the two stories there.
okay.
Yeah.
I just want to go back to Lisa because I want to let her go and have a couple of moments with you, Andy. Lisa, you mentioned the name of a country 10 minutes ago, and we let it go by, but I can't let it go by. Yesterday, I did an editorial on this program, and I doubt you saw it. You're a busy person. If you want, you can look it up. But the editorial was specifically about Kamala as a Manchurian candidate, and followed by things that were going on in the world. And I mentioned, Andy, we'll talk about that later. Iran was one of my topics. And Iran, as far as I'm concerned, if you could get that straight, first, the Iranian people are a lovely people. And if you know Persians who live amongst us, they always were. And Iran, before 1979, when Ayatollah Khomeini came home, as it were, and they overthrew the Shah, that became the country that it is, run as it is by religious zealots called mullahs. You get rid of them and you get old Iran back, and that would be a perfect piece of the puzzle to go into the Middle East, most countries of which are ready to sign what are called the Abrahamic Accords, which would finally, in our lifetimes, make peace in that region. I don't see it happening so soon, but that's what would happen.
Yeah, I think that you'd have to be naive not to know that all of this is being harbored in Iran. And if we don't deal with Iran, then we're going to continue to see challenges around the world. So that's a big thing. I just want to touch a little bit on, I don't want to go into the Kamala Harris or Donald Trump issue, but I will.
Don't. It's a whole other subject.
Well, it is, except in this case, it isn't. When you think, and we're talking about social media, and then you've got Iran and China and Russia having some fun with misinformation. And then you have Mark Zuckerberg just coming out today to say that the Harris-Biden administration, or the Biden-Harris administration, forced him to, to deal with information that they didn't want, and they would, whitewash it or whatever. I think that only just showcases to a lot of people who are interested in these areas, whether that's public safety, security, pandemics, whatever. It really gives them cause to really question what we're seeing and if we're allowed to see what we should see. And that's a problem. And I think we've got to deal with that, in addition to dealing with Iran and some of the other horrible actors that are out there. But I have no time for Iran. They're funding all of these terrorist organizations, and they're using the Jewish people and the Jewish state as a punching bag right now. But the minute they win there, if they ever do, which they won't, they come for another group next. And the question is, who is it?
That's that old, I can't remember the name of the author, and there was no one to fight for Jews, so they came for me, that kind of thing. So I think that's the worry. That is the worry. And by the way, to put a not too fine a point on it, I have the Zuckerberg quote here, not quite a quote. He said he planned to fight pressure from the White House to censor content. He also said he would not make donations to anyone in the current campaign. Do you believe him?
I think that he's trying to get ahead of something much worse. So I don't know who his communications advisors are, but obviously, we all know how this stuff works. And having spent time in a cabinet, knowing that, you have a mission to save people's lives, even if they don't like it, they still have rights. And if he played fast and loose with those rights, then that's going to be a problem for him. And I'm sure it's probably going to come out at some point. And I'm sure he's not going to give anybody any money. He's going to
Lisa,
want to
first, I got to say, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for what you've done. And I also want to say, since I haven't seen you for a long time, you're looking absolutely great.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Feeling really good. And Andy, it was a super pleasure to meet you. I'll get you a blue cap next time, even if it says CNN on it. I like that color better.
As long as it doesn't say Shurman, I'm cool with it.
He hides. I'm the only person who has his address. So send it to me.
All right. And then you'll send me back his address so we can go visit him.
Absolutely. Take care, Lisa.
Yeah. Okay. Come on over anytime, right?
Okay.
That's the type of person I am. Maritimer. All right.
Good
thanks,
to see you.
Take it easy.
Bye-bye. There goes Lisa. Well, that was an interesting turn of events, Andy. We started off together because she wasn't online, but she wound up coming online, and that was an interesting conversation.
That's the beauty of this kind of report type of media. You could not do that on radio.
Well, you could, but it'd sound like a dog's breakfast. I don't think it
I
was
don't think
here.
it would. That was genuine. You and I were talking. She came
Absolutely.
on, put her on. That's how life goes. Oh, invite the person in the room. I think this sort of thing, and when mainstream media is missing out and talk radio is, to me, this should be people listening in on a conversation, not some, made up stuff that sounds good. Does that make
Well,
sense?
that would, I have to say, that was pretty real. I mean, we had a guy who bills himself as the small businessman. That's what you do, living in an area that is fairly, how do I put it, monolithic. And we're talking about things that are maybe a little bit funny, playing about the hat. We get a serious person who has been in cabinet, who represents a community, who talks about what the community is thinking and gives us a chance to respond. I think that was a good conversation. Anyway, let's get back into what we were doing.
I'm going to hijack you for 1 second.
Okay,
here.
do it.
A lot of people, me included, okay, and you and I had this moment, and maybe this is how we finish up, is that I'm not a fan of politicians. A lot of people are not a fan of politicians.
I know.
But when I've met you, I met Tim Hudak, I've met Doug Ford doing radio at 1010 and 640, and Lisa MacLeod, I'm always shocked at how, and I hate the word, nice those politicians are, how smart they are, and how caring they are. But that is not how they come across in public, and that is not
We
how
don't
they
sell
do.
ourselves well enough. The people you named, and I know them all, are smart people, and their motivations. And with me and Tim Hudak, we were both in politics together. He's no longer in politics. I'm no longer in politics. But I can tell you, although we had our moments of butting heads, he's a nice guy and he's a smart guy. And
So-
Doug Ford, he's a nice guy and a smart guy too.
Let me ask you a question. Let me turn the tables on you. You can be
Sure.
my guest for a second. I've known you for years. You're a great guy. You believe in things. What was the moment that you went from being Peter Shurman, nice guy, whatever, to being a politician? Why? Why does it change?
Why did I make the decision to do it?
No, is there a point that you change and stop being Peter Shurman, the guy
No,
next door?
the fact is, I'd probably still be in it if I didn't feel that it wasn't for me anymore. And it's important when you ask that question. I don't think I've ever explored this in public. It's not a great secret. I went in it because I had sold my business. I was a small businessman, and I had sold it for enough that I didn't have to work anymore, and I was in my late 50s. So I was a lucky guy, I guess, or a hardworking guy, or maybe a bit of both. And I decided that I had always been fascinated by politics. I was going to try to get into a position where I could run for politics and see if you could be in that business and be honest. And the answer is you can be in that business and be honest, but you discover that there are people with knives out who may make you, and it was the case with me, seem that you're dishonest, which is why I got out. That's it.
I asked Peter, Tim Hudak, the same thing. Afterwards, he said, "You haven't asked me." I said, if the guy that had sat next to me at 1010 had been the same guy that appeared on the TV, I would have voted for him. He said, you get all these handlers that keep telling you what to say, and they keep doing this, do that. He said that somewhere in there, and I'm saying this for your reaction, is somewhere in there you lose Tim Hudak and you become Tim the politician.
Well, Tim became leader and regular member. Like Lisa was in cabinet. Now she's a regular member again. I was only a regular member. And not only that, I was only ever in opposition. The PC party under first John Tory when I went into it, and then Tim Hudak, who was elected to the office and ran for 2 elections and lost them both. So I wound up, I'm not knocking any of those men for that happening. It happens. I wound up only ever being in opposition. I can't speak from the government side, which Lisa just did. But I never felt that change. When I did media, which I often did for the party, because they figured he's done media, he knows how to handle them. And it was true, I did. They'd say, our message for this week is economic. So I don't care what they ask you, you're going to talk economics. So the question might be, what do you think of the fact that, I don't know, the Eglinton Crosstown hasn't been finished and it's been 11 years. And I would say, well, that's just another example of how they waste money on the other side, because governments can never say they're going to do anything and finish it on time or on budget. And that's why you see an Eglinton Crosstown like that. By the way, I may have just answered that question about the Eglinton Crosstown in actual truth. But the bottom line is that's what you do. You spin it around and you use that opportunity to put your messaging out there. That's why people think they're dishonest. It's not dishonest. It's a way of handling things. And I never, in my 7 years at Queen's Park, I can honestly say I never saw blatant dishonesty ever.
I forget who said this.
Look at this. This is my show and you're interviewing me, and I don't mind.
Well, of course I am, because you're relatively interesting, and nobody else would this. Well, you're not very interesting. It's relatively interesting. But no, I always find that just a fascinating thing. Tim Hudak had absolutely the best. You had a good line once too. Now, when I met him, I said, I've got to tell you, I don't like politicians. And even more, I don't like people with great hair, right? And he turned around and he looked at me. We went in the studio and he made this big thing about putting the headphones on. They looked at me and said, I hate politicians too.
Well, he was an astute guy, and I think he was very accurate. And I got to tell you, I look back on it, there's a piece of me that always rues the day that I made the decision to leave. And I did make that decision because I think I probably could have gone on and done some interesting things in government, but I didn't. Instead, I'm sitting here talking to you, and we're actually overtime. Okay. So I owe you one.
Why? No, this is the fun of it.
This was fun. This was great. And I think people out there will have enjoyed this back and forth and the three-way as well. So I'm not dissatisfied with the show, but I still want to get back and talk about the relatively significant and insignificance of it. And so we'll have you back sometime in the next week and a half. Andy Stinton, great to see you and great to have you.
Thanks for having me. Ciao.
All right. Take care. And all of you take care as well. I'm going to say goodbye to Andy, and I'm simply going to say goodbye to you by mentioning that this is the Shurman Report. This is the third week that we've been on. I'm amazed at the number of people who are paying attention, both because of your reactions on social media and because of the numbers that I get to take a look at of views that these videos are getting, as well as the downloads of the podcast. Thanks for being with us on the Shurman Report. I will see you same time tomorrow.
The Shurman Report, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the video version at YouTube, Facebook, and always at petershurman.com. Thanks for listening to the Shurman Report. If you'd like to connect with Peter directly, just go to petershurman.com.